Rabbi Friedman, just give me a second. Thank you for another show. I will count my blessing every single time on behalf of myself and our entire community for having this opportunity, weekly opportunity to speak to you and to get the incredible wisdom and hopefully make everybody feel better and a little smarter, a little wiser. So thank you very much for being with us. Tonight we are going to be celebrating the happiest day for the Jewish people. A day that actually is not really being celebrated. It just is. It's considered to be the happiest day of the year. So that brings a question to mind. What is true happiness and how can we achieve it?
Simple questions you ask.
Always.
Yeah, it is the 15th of the month of Av. A few days after the fast day of the 9th of Av, which is the saddest, most painful day on the Jewish calendar. It was the day that the first temple was destroyed. It was the day that the second temple was destroyed. And many tragedies began on this day for Jews through history. And so we fast, and we remember the destruction, and we grieve what could have been, what should have been. And then comes the 15th of the month. The 15th of the month is when the moon is in its full glory, the full moon, which means the completion, the wholeness of nature, of creation. So the 15th of every month is significant. In fact, Pesach comes out on the 15th, begins on the 15th of the month. Sukkot begins on the 15th of the month. When the moon is full, I know some people go crazy, but when the moon is full, it represents the fullness, the completeness in nature. Now, to have a full moon after the 9th of Av is special, because we're going from the worst, the lowest, most painful condition back to a healthy condition. That is the cause for joy. Just in very practical terms, like after the Holocaust, the moon was never going to be full again. How could it? Some people suffer a terrible tragedy, God forbid. They don't understand why the sun is shining. Why is everything normal? So after the Holocaust, we didn't expect the moon to ever be full again. But it is. We're back to life. We're back to being productive. We're back to the joy of life. Who would have thought? In fact, if you're having joy after pain, that's a greater joy. So here's a beautiful concept. You see a guy before the Holocaust, and you have a way of measuring his happiness from 1 to 10. And it's a 10. His enthusiasm for life is a 10. Then the Holocaust happens. And you meet this guy after the Holocaust, and you measure his happiness, and it's a 10. So he is as happy as he was before. That's not possible. Can't be as happy as you were before. You're either slightly depressed or you are much happier than you were before. Because happiness means enthusiasm for life. If you're enthusiastic about a life that does not include a Holocaust, that's a 10. But if you're enthusiastic about a life, even if it does include a Holocaust, come on. You are much more enthusiastic about life than you were before. You have found something in life that is perfect, that is pleasurable, that is exciting, even if it includes a Holocaust. You have tapped into something much deeper than you had before. So here's the principle behind it. When we come from a dark room, physically dark room, and suddenly somebody turns on the light, or you walk into what happens? The light hurts. Why? Because your eye needs to adjust. When you're in a dark place, your eye physically opens up, the lens opens up as wide as it can, hoping to catch whatever little bit of light there might be. All of a sudden, somebody turns on the light. Well, your lens is way too open, way too receptive, and it will take in more light than it can handle. So after darkness, there is more light. Not just you appreciate the light, there is physically more light because your eye is taking in more light than normal. And why is it taking in more light? Because in the dark, your desire for light, your hunger for light, makes the eye open wider. So your capacity for taking in light, for seeing the light, is greater. The same is true with wisdom after foolishness. When you go from not knowing, from being uninformed, misled, false information, a false understanding, a false belief, and then you discover the true understanding or the true belief, you get more than if you had never been mistaken. Or in different language, if you have a question that makes you uncomfortable, and you're desperate for an answer, your mind, like the eye, opens wider. So when the answer comes, you take in more wisdom than if you hadn't had the question. This is why at the Seder, we try to stimulate children to ask a question. Because when you're asking a question, your mind is more receptive. You'll get more of the answer than if I told you exactly the same answer when you didn't ask a question. So the hunger for information and for knowledge increases your capacity to absorb knowledge. And the same is true with pain and pleasure. The same is true with happy and sad. After a sadness, where your heart is desperate for some joy, the joy that comes and follows is a greater joy. How is it greater? Your capacity is greater. Your heart opened up wider than usual, hoping to catch some joy. So the joy that comes after sadness, after pain, is a greater joy. So the fullness of the moon that comes after the 9th of Av, after the worst day on the calendar, is more exciting than the 15th day of all the other months. It's basically the story of the Jewish people. We've experienced the lowest possible conditions, actually impossible conditions. And then the moon is full again. Always. Always the moon is full again. So yes, it is a very happy day. And today we start wishing each other a Happy New Year. Because now that we're optimistic, we can think about the future. On the 9th of Av, you can't think about the future. You're too pessimistic.
So is it fair to say that things are always measured in comparison and by comparison?
That's the conventional understanding. There's more light after darkness because now you appreciate the light. The comparison, the contrast. But there's something more. Your capacity for light is greater. See, the eye yearns for light. The heart yearns for joy. And the mind yearns for enlightenment. The harder it yearns, the greater the capacity. So it's not just an appreciation, it's a whole new talent.
How does one go about acquiring such a talent? Or do we have to be born with it?
It's like the guy said, the first step towards repentance is the sin. To repent, you first have to sin, right? In order to increase your love for someone, you got to get into a fight with them. You got to create some distance. That distance will make you yearn for closeness. And then the closeness that follows is greater than the closeness you had before. So how do you love someone more after a fight when you loved them completely before the fight? Assuming, right, hypothetically, if your love for your spouse was absolute, complete, total, your whole heart, soul, and might, then you get into a fight. And after the fight, when you make up, you love him more than before. How could it be more? You already had the maximum amount of love that you were capable of. So at best, you go back to that, but you can't have more. You can have more because some of the pain that was caused by the fight, by the disagreement, when you make up, some of that energy becomes love energy, which you didn't have before. So you steal a little of the sadness and turn it into happiness. You steal a little of the pain and turn it into pleasure. So it actually increases your capacity. You can, if there was some way of measuring this on a machine or on a computer, you actually have more love energy than you had before. That's because of the yearning. So we've been yearning for Mashiach, for the third temple, much longer than we yearned for the first two. I mean, much longer. I don't know how much we yearned for the first one. It was a gift. But for the second one, we yearned for 70 years. 70 years. That's about the lifespan of communism. It's a long time for an individual. But historically, what's 70 years compared to 2,000 years since the second temple was destroyed? So we've been yearning for 2,000 years. That gives us a great capacity. So the third temple will be radically greater, dramatically greater.
God willing. Rabbi Friedman, is there a way to control that energy that we need to love more, be more enthusiastic, become happier because of that? Can we somehow make it happen without bad things happening to us, without the fights, without the disappointments, without everything? Can we get to the next level without the negativity?
Well, now that we've had all the negativity we need, yes, from now on, we can do it without. We've satisfied that requirement quite well. In general, how do we create an optimistic, positive attitude towards the future? Or do we just have to roll with the waves and be a victim of our experiences? The principle of mind rules the heart. Mayach shalit al halev. Very central principle in Chabad thinking, in Hasidic thinking. The mind governs the heart. It doesn't mean control your temper or your jealousy or your depressions. The mind governs the heart means the heart looks to the mind for instruction. It's like the heart is a child and it looks to the mind, which is the parent, for instruction. The heart is a little insecure. So it wants instruction from the mind, which goes against some of the popular psychological assumption that if you don't do what your heart wants, you're going to be suppressed, repressed, depressed, and you're going to need therapy. It's not so. The heart wants the discipline of the mind. It needs it. Pretty much like sailors in a submarine. What will make them happy and what will make them nervous? Well, they don't know what's going on. They can't see anything. There's one guy who is looking through the periscope. He sees what's going on. So he knows whether they're in trouble, whether the approaching ship is the enemy, or your own. So everyone else in the ship, their mood, their feelings, their emotions are completely dependent on what the guy is going to tell them from what he sees in the periscope. So if he says enemy ship approaching, everyone's going to get nervous. And they should. If he says, I can see the shore, we're home, then everybody's going to be happy. So the heart is like the people in the submarine, and the mind is like the guy looking through the periscope. So the heart really can't know whether it should be happy, positive, exciting, optimistic, or should it be frightened and should it be pessimistic. What's going to create the heart's attitude is the information that the mind gives it. Now, the mind, unlike the heart, has options. The guys inside the submarine, they have no options. They have no other access to information. But the guy with the periscope, he can look to the west, he can look to the east, he can look up, he can look down. So the mind is much more flexible. It has options. Of the options that the mind has, which one should you choose? Well, the one that is most beneficial to the heart. Why take the option that is harmful when you have an option that is healthy? So you can be pessimistic, you can be optimistic. Which one is right? They're both right. So which one?
Pessimistic can be right?
Sure. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Things can get worse. Sure. There's this joke about a guy who is very pessimistic, very pessimistic. And he was getting on people's nerves till finally somebody said to him, "Can't you think of a single optimistic thought?" He thought, and finally said, "Oh, yeah, I got one. Today is much better than tomorrow is going to be." Today is much better than tomorrow. So optimistic. Anyway, pessimistic is a reality. The glass is half empty, but then it's also half full. When the Rebbe had the heart attack, the doctors were telling him that he can't talk, and he has to rest, and he can't eat this, and he can't eat that, and the Rebbe was not buying it. So the doctor said to him, 80% of people who have this kind of heart attack don't recover. The Rebbe didn't say anything. The doctor said, "You heard what I said." And the Rebbe said, "Yes, you said 20% of the people recover." So both are true. So which one should you choose? Rationally, sensibly, you choose the one that works better, that serves you better. So what's better, to be pessimistic or to be optimistic? Assuming that it's an even choice.
Optimistic without a doubt?
Yes. It's encouraging, it's energizing, it motivates you to get up and do something. Pessimism can motivate you, or it can paralyze you.
The argument here would be that we're fooling ourselves and not trying to assess the situation truthfully. That's what a lot of people would say at this.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We can be irrationally biased towards the positive because we're desperate. But the pessimism can also be irrational. So which one is more realistic? Neither is more realistic. You don't decide what's realistic by comparing negative to positive or optimism to pessimism. If you want to know what's realistic, then look at the facts. Before you decide whether it's pessimistic or optimistic, just look at the facts. Once you're getting into pessimism or optimism, you're talking about attitude, not about information. You're talking about emotion, not about intelligence. So your intelligence tells you what are the facts on the ground. It doesn't tell you to be pessimistic. It can tell you there's a very real danger facing us. That's the fact. And it's real. Now, how are we going to respond to that? Does that mean we're in big trouble and tomorrow is going to be terrible? Or we're going to have good news and the danger will pass? So there are two really different considerations. People are concerned because we still remember the 30s. Those who said, this is dangerous, we better get out of here. And those who said, nah, it's nothing, it'll pass. So we're afraid of making the same mistake again, of not being realistic in our assessment. But again, pessimism is not more realistic. It's just more intimidating, discouraging. But concerning that, were we misled? Were we blind? Were we irresponsible in our response to the popularity of Hitler? Should we have realized this is big trouble and left? I'm not so sure. That's too simplistic. It's not so easy to pick up and leave. And if everybody picked up and left, would that have created a whole new problem? So the hindsight is not always so perfect. The question is, what is the more useful and the more productive way of thinking in view of a danger? So you see, if the cup is full, then the debate is over. We have a debate only when the cup is not full. And then the question is it half empty or is it half full? So when there's no problem realistically, we don't have a debate. When there is no problem, nobody asks, should I be pessimistic or optimistic? Unless you're really paranoid and you're making up a danger that doesn't exist. But most people will have to make a choice between optimism and pessimism when there is a problem. When things are not perfect, at least, right? When the cup is not full, now you have to decide. That imperfection, does that mean things are just going to get worse? Or, despite the imperfection, we're doing quite well? Optimistic, pessimistic. But in general, the mind governs the heart means you have the option of choosing the emotion for the heart to experience, because the heart doesn't know which way to go. It can't see anything. It's inside your chest. There's no periscope for it. So it doesn't know. So every morning it wakes up and it calls the head and says, hi, how are things? What's going on? Good things? Oh, okay, good. Not so good things? Whoa, you're scaring me. So the heart needs the mind. They're not in a contest of will where the heart wants one thing and the mind wants something else. That happens on occasion, but that's the exception. As a rule, the heart wants the mind to tell it what to feel because it doesn't know.
Don't we get a emotion first and then we assess that emotion?
Yeah, but those are not real emotions. Those are like sensations, or when you're worried and you don't even know what you're worried about.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. When you're in love with something or someone and you don't even know where it came from. In other words, spontaneous emotion. Those are not real. They're obviously instigated from something outside yourself. Something excited you, but it's not you. It's an acquired emotion. And then you have to ask yourself, should I welcome this emotion or reject it? It's a stranger. It's a foreign substance introduced into your system. Do you want it? You don't want it. But where, for example, you should love your children. You should love your parents. You should love your spouse. This is not a foreign thing. This is not a spontaneous thing. So how do you control that? You should, yes, I should love my children. I don't. I should love my spouse. I don't. What do I do about that? That's life. That's the human being. The human being can generate the emotions that he knows he ought to have. Animals can't do that.
Can we always generate the emotions? It doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem that everybody is in such control of their emotions. Would be better.
I think we have a big misunderstanding about that. Maybe pop psychology has convinced us that emotions rule and the mind is feeble in its attempt to control the emotion. Obviously, when you're emotional, it's hard to calm down. But that's not the way it works. You don't calm down an intense emotion when it's raging. You choose the emotions that you feel are proper and necessary and beneficial when you're calm. I don't love my spouse. It's not raging emotion. I don't love her. Well, what can I do about that? The mind can change the heart, even from hate to love, or from love to hate. How is it you start to hate somebody you used to love? What happened?
They did something?
Huh?
They did something?
They did something, but the heart doesn't change on its own. New information. So even if they did something to hurt you, so now you're hurt and you love. You love the person who hurt you. What destroys the love is the brain. The brain says, oh no, this is not the person I married. Mm-mm. This is not the person I ought to love. And you kill the love because the emotions follow the brain. So when the brain says no, of course, when the emotion is out of control and raging, then it's not listening. It's not hearing what the brain is saying. That's also why in educating your children, you never give them good advice when they're having a tantrum, because they're not listening. You wasted the good advice on a child who didn't hear you. So you wait till they calm down and then you give good advice. Same is true within yourself. When your emotions are raging, when you're upset and angry and panicked, it's not a good time to reason with yourself. It works the other way. If in your mind you are convinced that there's nothing to get excited about, your spouse ignores you a little bit or pays attention to somebody else more than to you, it's nothing to get excited about. But then it happens again, and you get very excited about it. Upset, angry, frightened, resentful. But because your mind yesterday thought it's nothing to get excited about, your agitation, your upset today is not as intense as it was. Even while it's upset, it's not as upset as it used to be. Why? Because the mind has had its effect. Here's this example, which is a little scary. A husband says, "Did I hit my wife?" Yeah, I hit her. She got me so angry. I lost control and I hit her. You lost control? Yeah. I don't just hit people. I lost control and I hit her. So I said to this guy, "Did you hit her with a bat or with a brick?" He says, don't be crazy. I said, "Wait, when you lost control, you didn't hit her with a brick or with a bat?" "No, that's crazy." So you knew it was crazy even when you were out of control. That's what you're saying. I was out of control, but not that out of control. So what does that mean? It means you weren't out of control at all. You gave yourself permission to hit her. No, not with a bat. You never gave yourself permission to do that. That isn't going to happen. But a little physical, you allowed it. You allowed it. You didn't lose control. Which means your mind is in control, always. And that's why when I said that you hit her with a bat, he said, "Don't be crazy." He didn't say, "Don't be violent." He said, no, that's crazy. Which means the mind won't allow it. So even when he felt like he had lost control, he hadn't lost control.
Rabbi Friedman, but we react to other people's energy. So if someone has a positive energy, they make us feel positive. If somebody is angry, we react to the anger. If somebody is being even
annoying, we get annoyed.
Yes. So how do we not react to the energy that we are receiving? Or maybe we should react.
Exactly right. You're asking the mind for a decision. Maybe I should react. Well, who are you asking? Who's gonna guide you on this? Your mind. So the mind is always setting the boundaries. Sometimes you don't realize where your boundary lies, and you find out the hard way. So this guy who hit his wife came to him as a shock. He never knew that was acceptable in his thinking. Because when he's not upset, if you ask him, is it okay to slap your wife once in a while? He would say, no, of course not. But when provoked, he discovered that, yes, he will permit it. Not with a bat, right? So even when someone else is annoying us and creating feelings or emotions that are not our choice, even our response to that is measured. It's measured. Remember this woman who was in therapy most of her life. She was in her 40s. For as long as she can remember, she's been in therapy. They never quite figured out what it was that was disturbing her. She came to our program to Beis Hanan. She was there for a couple of weeks. And we talked. And it turns out the thing that she had never mentioned to her therapist, I don't know if it was a forgotten memory, a retrieved memory, I'm not sure. She remembers that when she was 6 years old, her mother disciplined her about something or refused to give her something, and she got very upset. And in her 6-year-old brain, the thought occurred to her that she could take a knife and stab her mother. When she realized what she had just thought, it scared her. And she never got over it. She was frightened by her own capacity for evil. How could I even thought to stab my mother? I'm so evil. I'm afraid of myself. That has been keeping her in therapy all her life. She scared herself.
Do we all have that kind of capacity in us that she has?
No, she doesn't have it either. She didn't have it. When provoked, she thought that. As soon as she calmed down, she was horrified by it. It's not in her to do that. There's no danger that she would do that.
So the thoughts that we get are not necessarily something we're going to act upon. We shouldn't get scared of bad thoughts, evil thoughts, negative thoughts, bad thoughts.
It depends on what your reaction is to that thought. Some guy was telling me that he's really, really terrified because he had a suicidal thought. A very real. He thought, I'm going to drown myself. So he even picked the method. And now he's really frightened. He's convinced that he's suicidal. So I said to him, when you had that impulse to go drown yourself, why didn't you go? The most amazing thing. He said, because the Hudson is filthy. Yes. He thought, no, I'm going to go to Florida and drown myself there. I mean, come on, have a little self-respect. Drown myself in polluted water, that's disgusting. Fresh water, clean water, that's amazing, really. The way the brain can, like the guy who said, okay, I'm going to drown myself, and he left. And he comes back 20 minutes later. They say, what happened? He said, oh, the water's cold. So what happened was the thought occurred to him to kill himself. That presented a question, a possibility, and the rest of his system said, no. Yeah, I hear you. Be nice, kill yourself, problems are over, but no. So the impulse was not the answer, the impulse was the question. And what you did afterwards, that was your answer. Rabbi, so you're not suicidal even when you're thinking of suicide, because your answer is no.
Rabbi Friedman, it's very interesting. We actually had two very long messages on our answering machine questions to you. I don't know if I should be lumping them together, but both of them are about happiness and coping with life. One was from a mother of a 25-year-old girl, and they're in therapy right now, the family, and the mother is super surprised because the parents and the child have absolutely two different perceptions of what their life is like. The parents thought they had a good family, a happy family, and the daughter, unfortunately, thinks that she's been wronged by her parents her entire life, and her childhood was miserable. She cannot remember any of the good things that the family did together, and her perception is very, very dark. So this is one call that we received, and the other one is about a young man who is very educated, comes from a good family, again, also was very, very loved. Again, this is from a mom, and still cannot cope with life. Dysfunctional. Turns to drugs, turns to alcohol, even though he has everything to live for, great support system, education, good education, but not happening. What would be, as I said, I don't know if we should be answering them together, but this is you, Rabbi Friedman.
I don't know if we should be answering them at all, because I don't know who we're talking to and what the circumstances are, and that would be risky to offer any suggestion. But some observation. The girl who says, my life has been miserable, and the parents are surprised to hear it, should not keep insisting that she's wrong. Don't correct your daughter. She's right. She's right. But where do you go from there? Disagreeing about reality is not helpful. Because if you say, no, your life was wonderful, we took very good care of you, we gave you everything. So what are you telling your daughter? That she's insane? What are you saying? You can't help a person if you think that their entire perception of themselves and of life is all wrong. So lock her up in an insane asylum. That's what you're saying. It's real and it's true. She did not get what she needed. That's it. That's the fact. Don't argue. The question is, if a person doesn't get what they need, what do? Most of us don't get what we need. Or not all we need. So the answer, in principle, in both cases, we don't need to be as needy as we think. That is the basis of every answer, no matter what the particular circumstances are. There is reason to be frustrated. Don't dismiss that. Don't deny it. Many of our needs are unheard, unattended to, and it's frustrating. The more importance you give to those needs that were not attended to, the worse you're going to feel. How am I supposed to live when nobody's taking care of this need that I have? The answer is, who says you have to be so needy? We're not living to pursue our needs and to satisfy our needs. That's not what life is about. That may be sad, but it's true. When we get too focused, hyper-focused on our needs, we cripple ourselves. We're actually telling ourselves, I can't live. I can't live like this. Yeah, you can. So the parents don't need to insist that all her needs were met, because that sends the message that if your needs were not met, then you're right, you can't live. Not a good message. A proper message, not in response to a person's pain, just in direction in life, the wisdom of life. The wisdom of life is, I am not so needy. Of course I don't have everything I need. So what? Nobody has everything they need. May appear at times that some people have everything they need. No, some people don't pay so much attention to their needs, so they're happier. But they don't have what they need.
But how can they convince approximately 25-year-old, let's say she's 25, it seems like she's in her mid-20s, how can they convince a girl that age that...
The first step is agree that she hasn't had her needs met. Otherwise, you have no business offering an opinion at all. If you don't even agree on the fundamentals, then you can't have a conversation. The first thing is you have to agree her needs were not met. Now you're on her side. Now your advice is welcome, at least to some degree. So don't dismiss a person's reality. It makes you the enemy. Recognizing a person's reality, now you can advise them on where to put their energies. Given the truth that your needs are not met. You know, what does an orphan do? The orphan's needs are not met. And it's not even a matter of debate. They're not met. So, where do you go? To make believe to an orphan, to make believe, oh no, you're fine, you're fine. That's cruel. You have to recognize the unmet, frustrated needs, but then where does that fit into life? What does that say about life? That you're doomed, that you're a failure, that you might as well quit? Or that, yeah, well, that's life. Needs are not met. So what is life all about if I can't satisfy my needs? Oh, it was never about satisfying your needs. Don't get religious about your needs. You're here because you're needed, not because you have needs. That's a very important reality check. But probably somebody outside the family should talk to this daughter, because between her and her parents, there's too much pain. So somebody a little more objective should sit down with the daughter and say, yeah, it's very sad. They completely misunderstood you, did not notice. They didn't do it maliciously, they just didn't notice. And your need was not met.
I certainly hope they heard your wonderful advice today, Rabbi Friedman, and everybody else got a little inspired of how they can, how we are really all sort of in control of our own happiness. And hopefully somebody took, or many people took away your wonderful advice today. So unfortunately, it's always the time and it's never enough of. And Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much for another fantastic program, inspirational, wise, and...
it's always just when I get going.
I know.
Okay.
So we'll pick it up next week, I hope. I mean, we have a lot to talk about. I think we should continue talking about happiness and achieving it because it's important, especially in the hard times, which everybody is going through to a point.
And there is no greater happiness than feeling needed. We're neglecting it. We're distracted. We think happiness comes from getting what you need. It doesn't. Happiness comes from knowing what we are needed for. If I know what I'm needed for, I know what I can do. Even if I'm not doing it, I'll only blame myself. But the fact that I know in life, the opportunity, the future looks good. Because I know. I haven't done it yet because, I'm a little slow. But I'm already happy because I know where I'm going.
So if life does not present any greater surprises to us between now and next week, hopefully we can pick it up right here and talk about what we're needed for on this earth. So, Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much. Every week is just a great gift to all of us. So thank you so much.